Hey everybody. So I wanted to comment a little bit about the assignments that you guys submitted last night. So first off, if you haven't watched this lecture, make sure you go back and watch that lecture. And it's just kind of dealing with kind of the overview of how we're going to approach reading this semester, or this summer, I should say. Quite a few people didn't watch that, so make sure you go back and take a look at that. One of the questions I asked you guys for the thesis, for the thesis and unity analysis here, was this question on, could everybody have a different answer to that question of what is so-and-so's thesis? The answer to that question is, in fact, no, we all can't have a different answer to the question, what was, Naylor's thesis, and everybody be right. So Naylor only has one thesis, and part of accurate reading comprehension is being able to identify what that thesis is. Now, in terms of could we all have a different response? Could we all think something different about her point? Yes, absolutely. We could all respond differently to the thesis. But accurate reading comprehension means that we can identify where in the text, remember the text is just black and white, where in the text the author is articulating his or her purpose. And so we want to make sure that we actually can have strong reading comprehension. Reading comprehension means that we're just able to kind of summarize and be able to make sure that we got the main point of the essay and all the kind of subclaims and how the writer was supporting those claims. So we want to make sure that we're having that kind of strong reading comprehension. So to that end, I want to take a look at these readings that you guys did for today and just kind of highlight for you guys where the thesis was. So if you did the assignment last night and you responded with the minimum requirements, you got full credit, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you answered these first questions correctly. So I really encourage you guys to kind of go back, look at your response, and then kind of compare it to the answers I'm giving you here, and make sure that you don't misread the text, right? So make sure that you've kind of tried to figure out what we can learn about your own kind of reading strategy by kind of going through this exercise of, oh, I thought the thesis was this, but it's really this other thing. So first off, for the Zhao essay. So her essay, some people said the thesis was, just really about trolling and this notion that trolling's been going on for a long time. She absolutely opens her essay that way. But when we actually get into what her actual thesis is, we don't get to that until she starts talking later on here. You can just really briefly, I'll kind of review some of this stuff. She's kind of defining trolling because she knows her audience. We have the readers of the New York Times opinion page. They might not know what trolling is, so she defines that for her audience. She does a little pathos here, and she tries to get the audience more engaged. Trolling isn't just some newfangled thing that young people do, right? This has been going on for a long time, so she brings up that Plato idea, the Ring of Gyges. And then when we get into some examples, she's got all these paragraphs where she's just giving examples of trollish behavior. And when we get to she starts talking about what people are doing about it, right? Doing legislation, but then she has this line here, but the law itself can't do enough. And that's when we know she's starting to get to her thesis idea, that she's saying this isn't enough, we need something else. She does a counterpoint here, and then she does another counterpoint here at the beginning of this paragraph. But when we get to the next paragraph, that's where we actually see her thesis is kind of articulated in full force the first time she articulates it. She says, well-designed commenting systems should also do their part. And then we see her kind of talking about these different commenting systems, right? And that what they're doing. So what Facebook is doing and Disqus is doing, etc. And then she finally gets to a very, very kind of clear assertion here. Content providers, kind of a call to action, if you will. Content providers, go ahead and start doing these things. So there's where we would say her thesis is most explicitly, that's with an E. So if remember explicit, explained, we actually can underline it. There's where her thesis is most explicitly stated. Okay, so that was for the first article you guys looked at. For the second article, for the Collier essay, people did a better job with this one in terms of identifying the thesis. I wanted to highlight in this article a little bit what he's doing with repetition. So some people really did some good work with that question I had about using repetition to achieve unity. He's also done this other thing with repetition, and that's something that a lot of people didn't notice. He does the same sentence structure again and again. Notice here he talks about, I learned, I developed a rule for myself. And notice we have that first person, I did this thing, and then we get the colon, and then we get the switch to the second person, right? Do what makes you anxious, don't do what makes you depressed. And we see that he kind of does this repeatedly 3 or 4 different times throughout the essay, where he says, I've gotten to this, I had this experience and I got to this new rule for myself. And he actually repeats that language rule. He repeats the colon. So right, remember colon is the 2 dots. He repeats the colon and then he switches to second person, the you voice. So he's using this kind of more sophisticated repetition in terms of his sentence structure. And we see him do that again and again. We finally get to his thesis here at the end. So when we're thinking about the different kind of models that are out there, I'm just going to pop into this thing. When we get to these different models, he's kind of doing this thing here at the end. Zhao was kind of doing that as well. Didn't articulate the thesis earlier on, but kind of waited until the end. Part of our critical thinking question would be, why would a writer do that? But for now, just keep this video short, I'm just going to kind of highlight that he made this kind of strategic choice to wait till the end, and we kind of get it here. The point is the new, the different is almost by definition scary. Every time you do it, the world opens up to you. So there's where we have the thesis for the Collier essay. Okay, and then the last essay that we read, the Naylor, people generally did a good job with this one, with the Naylor essay. She articulates her thesis explicitly, so we should be able to underline it. Some people thought the thesis is up here in this first paragraph. That's actually not where she actually articulates it. She says, second paragraph, words themselves are innocuous. It is without consensus. It is the consensus that gives them true power. So that's where we actually get her explicit thesis, where she articulates her purpose in writing this piece, is to prove this point here about language itself inherently doesn't have power. It's once a community around that language asserts a certain meaning to it, that the power is given to the language itself. Okay, so that was the Naylor essay. The other thing I wanted to talk about here then really briefly is if we go into the analysis you guys did on organization and paragraphing. McDonald, I think most people got that thesis idea in terms of identifying that really tough critical thinking question. A couple of people did some really good work. Madeline, I'll call out her especially, so you might want to take a look at Madeline's response to that. Jefferson's thesis, some people didn't quite identify the thesis with Jefferson. So the thesis actually happens here in this very first line of the text, where it's actually the end piece here. So when we have this problem, the people that are being kind of ruled should declare the causes that impel them for the separation. And that's in fact exactly what he's doing throughout this whole entire piece, right? Is declaring the different causes, almost like in a list format. This was something I hope you guys were kind of noticing, the repetition. He has refused, he has forbidden, he has refused, he has called. So we get this kind of long, almost a litany. He has this, he has this, he has this. And then we get to the bottom, after he's kind of the more kind of atrocious things that has happened that King George has done, then he moves on to for doing this, and so we've got this kind of logical pattern that he's kind of established, these larger problems that the colonists saw, and then maybe the ones that weren't as significant but still really important, and he kind of switches that with the for doing this, and then we get back to the he has. So kind of just listing off all those reasons. Again, back to our thesis idea, which is kind of sitting up here. They should declare the causes for their separation. Okay, so that was for the Jefferson. Zinsser, I think people did a pretty good job with that one. The Britt essay caused a lot of problems for people, and it's this notion of satire. So the essay wasn't about fat people and thin people. So she's using that. That's part of the satire. She's using that to get at this notion of stereotyping. Actually, I'm going to kind of step back from that word at this idea of watching people, right? Judging people just based off how they look. And so she uses the notion of one of the most things that we see right away when we watch people is kind of what their body looks like. So she looks at this difference between what she says is fat people and thin people, and then shows all these ridiculous assumptions people make just based off physical appearance. And that's what she's doing throughout the text. So she's satirizing this notion of judgment, of judging people, based off of just kind of just physical, what they look like. And she uses the illustration here of fat people and thin people to get at how ridiculous this notion is. So that's this notion of satire. Just a really quick point about this essay. I don't think this essay, part of the reason why I think this essay doesn't fly so well now is because we're in a different culture. This thing was written in the 1980s, and I think it probably landed different in the 1980s than it does now when a more modern audience reads it. But just keep in mind that satire oftentimes isn't kind of directly stating, right? It's not directly stating that all fat people are like this and all thin people are like this. She's actually trying to make fun of that kind of judgment. So, and maybe not make fun, and maybe critique it, right? So actually kind of a social commentary on how ridiculous judgment is like that, and stereotyping is. So that's the notion with the Brit essay. Okay, I think I hit all the points I wanted to. I'm checking my little list here. So I think I hit everything. But if you have any questions, of course, just email me and we can talk about it. But I hope that you guys go back and kind of think about your own reading process and where you might have missed something, or how maybe you need to kind of slow down to make sure you're kind of really differentiating between where the claims are and the supporting evidence. I'm going to say the big claim, right, the thesis claim, and then the subclaims, what we would call topic sentence ideas, where those things are located, and then where the support is for each one of those topic sentences. Okay, you guys, that's it. We'll talk soon. Bye.